We're going to start a new sermon series today entitled Magnetic People, looking at the connection that we need to make with one another and ultimately with Jesus. But if you walk into the front door of our church, if you came in that front door today and you looked up to the left, you have kind of the three things that we're trying to do as a church: connect, grow, and serve. So we've got all three of those things, but that first one, connect, is about everyone that we believe comes to our church needs to have a relationship with Jesus. You need to connect to him first and foremost. That's why we exist. But secondly, we want you to connect to other believers. We want you to have relationships with people who have a like faith. And we want you to have friendships. And so this sermon series is going to focus on finding and forming friendships throughout the church and throughout your life. And I know as I say that and I preach a sermon on this, that some of you are extroverts and you got lots of friends and you go, oh, why would they even talk about this? I can walk into a crowd and make all kinds of friends. But a lot of us are not like you, okay? I read an article. It was written, it was in the Los Angeles Times, or part of an article. It was in the Los Angeles Times by the Dean of Religious Life on the University of Southern California, USC. And they detailed how the first 5 years of their job said, I never received this question, but in the last couple years, I receive it daily. Someone walks up and says, how do I make friends? How do I make friends? I'm away from home. I'm separate from the place I grew up and the people I've known my whole life. I've walked into this strange area and I don't know how to connect. And before you think that's just something limited to college students, I want you to get a couple of other statistics. From science people said that across the United States, 13% of all people of all ages say we have no close friends. Almost 30% say we have no close friends. And those numbers actually increase if you look at men and if you look especially at the elderly. Because as they're losing friends as they get older, they don't know how to make new ones. How do I have a relationship? God, would you want it so bad? I want someone to share my joys. I want someone to talk to and enjoy the same hobbies and activities, but I don't know how to find them. I don't know how to keep them. I don't know. I just don't know. So to help you, we're going to go to an ancient book called Proverbs. And for 4 weeks, we're going to talk about nothing but relationships. And we're going to focus very specifically on four passages from Proverbs. And today we're going to start this off with Proverbs chapter 12, verse 26. The righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. Let me try to give you a little bit of context. Proverbs is what it sounds like. It's just one line after another. There's no real context to build very much on. It's a lot of just wise sayings. And so it's kind of like picking up the book of Galatians. Okay? All these famous people say the really great things, and you kind of read through and you kind of learn and grow and do there's some things that apply. But there's not much context to it. Now, in this passage, there's a little bit. So what's happening is Solomon is categorizing people into groups. And two of the groups that he's going to focus on are righteous and wicked. Okay? Here's the definition. The righteous are people that know the right thing to do. They know what God wants them to do, and they do it. Okay? That's what's righteous. The wicked, well, they may not even know the right thing to do, and they don't care. I don't care what God wants out of me. Or they know the right thing to do that God would want them to do, and they still say, I don't care. That's the wicked. They're ignoring God's instruction. And so we have these two groups that he says you can categorize most people into those. I think the two groups still exist today. That as I look across this crowd, as I go out into our community, there are still people who are righteous, who want to do what God says, and there are people who don't care. But what he does in this passage is he says, let's focus in not just on these two groups, but how their relationships are connected to that. And I'm going to draw out two simple ideas today. The first one is the power of connection. All right, the power of connection. Now, as I start this sermon and as I move into this, I have to give you something that's a little bit all head knowledge. I'm going to lose some of you. I hope you'll stay with me. Okay, but we got to take a step back. Our Bible comes to us primarily in two languages. The Old Testament was originally written in Hebrew, the New Testament written in Greek. Okay, the New Testament has some Aramaic in it, and so does the Old Testament. But primarily those are the two. And so what scholars do is through the years, they've collected the documents. We have the oldest manuscripts, the best reliable information, and we translate that from the original Hebrew language, people who are fluent in it, into English. We take the original Greek language and we translate it into English. Now, there are three ways to translate the Bible, all right? One is just word for word. We're going to take, this is the Hebrew word, this is the English word, this is the Hebrew word, this. Choose their friends carefully. That's what it said in the New International Translation of the Hebrew into English. But if you have a different Bible, particularly most people use what's called the English Standard Version. Here's that passage underneath it. The one who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor. Wait, that's not the same. That's not the same. One is completely different. Why is that? Well, let me give you the literal word-for-word translation, and we'll move forward with this. Let's go to the literal one. This one underlined here. The righteous will seek out his friends. Okay, that's the first line. The righteous will seek out his friends. What each one of the translators did was they said, we need to do is we're going to have to choose what the context would normally tell us to do. And there are two ways to interpret that line. One is the way that we influence other people. That's what the English Standard Version did. The righteous one is a guide for his neighbor. We're having influence over our neighbor, the next verse, so that they don't go astray. If we see that our neighbor is making poor choices, we as a good friend should go influence their lives to make good choices. That's what they took it. And that's truth. In fact, we just did a sermon series here, the last sermon series, which I talked about the influence we have over other people's lives, that we are called to be salt and light. And one of the best ways we can do that is to encourage other people, say words of encouragement. In fact, when I finished the sermon, over the next week, several of you reached out and said, that sermon hit home with me. And these are the kind of things you said. I was at a place in my life where, you know what, I was on a downward spiral and someone said something encouraging to me and it just changed the whole direction of my life. Or I got this. My life was headed the right way and I was thinking about stepping off the right path and someone offered an encouragement and it kept me going the right way. We have the power to influence other people. Now, what the NIV did was it took it the other way, not us influencing people, but it's talking about the people who influence your life. The righteous choose their friends carefully. The idea is very simple, that we have to live around people, and they are impacting us just the same way that we are impacting other people. Now, we have to recognize within the context, this is a negative statement. The people who come into our lives could be influencing us to move away from God. This is the statement in the New Testament. Paul writing to the church in Corinth, he says this in 1 Corinthians 15. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Someone can have good character, but if they surround themselves who was influencing whom? Well, Jesus was influencing them. They weren't going to knock him off of what he believed. Let me ask you, I know as I pose this sermon series, a lot of us in this room are thinking about, I hope my college student's listening. I hope my teenager's listening. I hope my child's listening. I mean, I wish my kid were in here today. They need to hear this. But I want to ask you, as an adult in this room today, when is the last time you evaluated the friendships that you have in your life? When have you evaluated, are they influencing me or am I influencing them? Here's 3 questions maybe to help you process this, okay? The people in your life, when you look at them, do you have the same values as this person? Or maybe I need to clarify it. Do you still have the same values? See, because the things that brought you together when you were 8 years old in elementary school, the things that kept you together when you were in high school may not apply anymore 20 years later. And we say, yeah, but they're my oldest friend. But does that mean they're good for you? See, some of you have come to know Jesus, and you say, I'm going to take my faith seriously, and you still have a friendship with someone. Well, who's influencing whom? Let's go to a second question. When you're together with your people in your life, is faith even a part of your conversation? If you're a person who says, I'm serious about my faith, but every time I get together with them, I never talk about my faith, loved the Lord. She was on our worship teams. We put her on the worship team. He was a youth group. He was a leader in the youth group. He was really Lord, he was doing great things. Her senior year, she went on a 1-week mission trip. She raised money on a mission trip. When we made it together, she graduated with, she drove about an hour and a half to the university. At the university, she didn't know anybody, so the two places that was the most easy to make relationships were at the sorority and fraternity parties. Rumor gets back to the preacher. She was still coming back to sing every Sunday. Rumors get back to the preacher. Do you know what's going on in her life? Oh, I'm not going to go on rumors. But it was all confirmed when she met a guy and they quickly moved in together. And I had to sit down and say, look, there's nothing in your life that seems to be reflecting faith. And she not only quit the worship team, she quit the church, and she walked away from the Lord. And it's so amazing that the 2 years, in a 2-year time span, she went from a girl on a mission trip to a girl someone needed to reach as a mission. Only thing that separated those was the relationships that she brought around herself. There's power in connection. That leads me to my second thought. My second thought is, therefore, we must choose our connections wisely. Therefore, we must choose our connections wisely because they have so much power to influence us for good or for bad. He says, you got to think this through. I'm going to go back to the passage again. Proverbs 12:26. The righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. Now, if you have a different translation, if you look this up, you have a paper Bible like an ESV, you have it on your phone, you're going to see that most of them also translate this word friends as neighbors. And the reason they do that is because in their culture, there's a lot of overlap. Think about this. The people you usually make friends with are the people that you spend the most time around. Okay? In their culture, they don't have a car to drive off to work. Okay? They don't have a factory that they're going to work in and be surrounded by people. The people they're going to spend their time with are their closest neighbors, the people who live right around them. And we often choose our friends from within that circle. We did back then, still true today. This was a few years ago, but I went and heard, it was at a church conference. One of the speakers was named Guy Kawasaki. I don't know if you know that name at all. He was one of the early guys with Apple, with Steve Jobs. They actually hired him. His role was called an Apple evangelist. He would travel around the country telling people, you need to invest in this, telling people you need to support this. Unique thing about him, everywhere he spoke, he always said 2 points. If you always do his work, or his lesson, we're gonna get that. People about leadership, people about telling other people about your business, always. Well, I know when he heard as he worked through this list of things, he said, one of the questions that we most often, is when I go on the university campus, I go out to do other things, I always ask this question, where is the best place for us to work? And I know what they're asking me. They're asking me, should we work for Apple? Should we work, what company should we hire into? And he said, I told him this. I said, whoever offers you a job, you say, I'm going to go there and I'm going to meet all the people that I'm working with. He said, because you're going to spend 8 to 10 hours every day, 5 days a week with those people. And if you don't like them, your job will be miserable no matter how great the company is. You need to work with people who you have a connection. What I'm saying out of that some of our the people that you're going to have closest to your life are most often the people that you work with. And a lot of us have come into our friendships by default. And so that leads us to this other thing that you kind of drive home. You don't have to do that. You don't have to choose all of your relationships. I want to work with them. I guess I'm going to be my friend. You have a choice. You can choose the people that you want to include and bring into your life. Now, as an element of wisdom to this, you got to think through and discern, are these people, is their life on the same trajectory as mine? Are their values the same as mine? Is their character the same as mine? But it's fascinating, the word in the middle of this. Now, the NIV puts the word choose. Again, if you have a different translation, it's probably better. It's the word seek. it's not just a word, it's a word picture. So in other words, the places that it's used elsewhere help us to kind of picture what he's trying to say. And this word is used the most with gold mining. I can't say that. I've said that wrong both sources. Gold mining. There's no D in the second word. Gold mining. You're to seek after friends like miners seek after gold. Now, I don't know a lot about gold mining, but I have TikTok. And so I type in gold mining, gold prospecting, and I'm going to tell you, for the next 3 days, I had about 300 videos that it wanted to give me to watch. And of course, I watched a lot of them. He gets sucked into this vortex. Anyway, well, this one guy, he's gone up into the mountains into this place, and it never does say where he's at, but he's found an old area where they mine. There's an old sluice that's in the ground. And he said, oh, they've mined here. He said, but I just like this big old boulder. He goes, I think behind that there's got to still be some gold. And so over the next several videos, he goes and he literally has equipment help move boulders out of the way. Then they move other rocks out of the way. And then he gets down to where he's got the smaller stuff, and he starts picking some of that running all there. Then he takes out the carpet, he puts it in his pan, he goes down to the water, and he starts panning that. Showed up and sat in the front was all the card club. She told me 2 weeks ago that Pat's having some problems. She can't see very well anymore. She's really starting to slip into depression. She said, so I'm calling Pat every day now and make sure she's okay. And I come and go pick her up. My 90-year-old mother goes and picks her up and takes her to Walmart so that she can get what she needs. And I just don't want her to be alone now. All I can think is that group has become to her like gold. When everything else is gone, there's these people who still love and support her and care for her. And Solomon says, you need to bring people into your life that are like that. And if you do, they're like a precious jewel. So choose and seek wisely. Now, the problem is for many of us, well, how do I do that? Okay, that's where we started. The question is, how do I make friends? And I say, well, I can give you some pointers and some advice, but one of the things I just want to tell you is you have to expose yourself to people with similar goals, dreams, and beliefs. Surround yourself with people so that you can talk to and begin to define out, this is people I have things in common with. See, my 4 boys, My four boys, they're all completely grown now. The youngest graduated college. They all have careers. They all have lives. And we have these conversations with them regularly. Still, they call and they say, I just don't feel like I have any good friends right now. I'm going through difficult. And we start this conversation, and it always goes the same way. I said, listen, if you go try to meet your friends in a bar, what you're going to find is alcoholics. If you try to meet all of your friends at work, you're going to meet people who are driven by success. If you try to meet them all at the gym, you got people do this. You just open it up. In 12 months, you're going to have 3 great friends. There's no guarantee. But I can tell you this. You'll be a lot closer to having 3 great Christian friends in a year if you'll expose yourself to that than if you don't. If you just keep doing the things that you're doing, hoping that maybe God just throw somebody into my circle. Maybe you have to step out of your circle for who God wants you to meet. Relationships have this power over our lives. They can lead us closer to God and to a better life, or they can lead us away from God. They can change the trajectory of your life. Therefore, Solomon says, be very wise. Whether you end up righteous or wicked may be very much based on the people that you surround yourself with. Gary gave me this book a couple months ago. He said loaned, but I think it's semantics. I've been reading through it. It's called Relational Intelligence by Dr. Darius Daniels. In the very introduction, he tells about how he went to college his second year as a sophomore. He said, I was just feeling disconnected. He calls it situational depression. So I just was in a situation where I didn't have many people in my life, and I was really coming down on myself. And he said, 3 people said to me, you need to meet Terrence. So as weird as it was, I said, Terrence, you want to get together for lunch? And he said, we went and had lunch, and we sat down, and we just started talking, telling stories of our lives, asking questions of one another. And he was done. Hour was gone in just moments. And he said, so Terrence, let's do this again. He said, one by one. He said, we started having lunch regular basis. He said, I realized possess all of us need relationships like that. All of us need to be friends.